You may have heard the quote, it's been said before, I think, therefore I am. It comes from the philosopher Rene Descartes, who said that this is how we know that we exist. This is how we know that we are humans. And then moving into the mid-20th century, you had a missiologist who went by the name of Leslie Newbigin, who joked that at that point in time, he said, no, actually, the way that we know we are human, it should be said, I shop, therefore I am. And then moving into our current time, there is a theologian whose name is N.T. Wright, and he was reflecting on Romans chapter 8 that we're going to read this morning, and this is what he said. He said, for the Christian, the phrase is, I am loved, therefore I am. I am loved, therefore I am. We sang about it in the songs that we just lifted up over and over, that we are loved by God. And so I am loved, therefore I am. So instead of thinking and going, we know we exist, humanity exists because we think like Descartes, or as Newbigin joked, we shop, therefore we am, we are, the Christian says, I truly exist and I matter because God values me and delights in who I am. So this morning, you have value, and you matter because the God that created you and the God that saved you values you and delights in who you are. There are some of us sitting in here this morning that you just need to sit under that phrase that he values you for who you are. Because your week has told you that it's not true. Your thoughts have told you that it's not true, but yet you are loved, you are valued by the God that created you. And this is the foundation on which the Christian life exists. This is an irrefutable fact that you are loved by God, which is really easy for us to agree with that statement if you've had a good week, if you've had a good day, or a great Sunday morning where it felt great outside and the sun is shining and you get to come to your favorite church and you get to sing some of your favorite songs in worship. And it's really good in these moments to go like, yes, I am loved by God. But if we're honest, we also have moments in our lives that make us wonder where God's love is when we go through those difficult times. And so Paul is writing to a group of Christians in Rome that are experiencing these moments where they have questioned God's love for them. It's moments in which they have gone through the valley and the shadow of death feels very, very close. And it has led them to a place where many of them have asked God quietly a similar question that we have asked God quietly is, God, I'm following you, so why is life not easier? Why am I having to go through this difficulty? Why is this what I'm walking through at this very moment? It's the question that comes up every once in a while in our life with Jesus, in which we say, where are you in the midst of my pain? In the midst of the difficulty and the struggle that I have in my life, where are you? And Paul answers this question at the end of Romans chapter 8. And the way he answers it, it's almost like one of the greatest locker room speeches that we have in Scripture. He's asking these questions, not necessarily wanting the team to answer, but just asking them and wanting them to think about it. And so he starts in Romans chapter 8. We'll look in verse 31. Let's just read this first portion of verse 31, and he says, what then shall we say to these things? Now let's stop and talk about what these things are. What is he talking about as he's transitioning clearly into this next portion of his letter? Well, he's talking about everything that he talks about in chapter 8. Chapter 8 covers a lot of ground. And so in the first 11 verses that they have, Paul's addressing this issue that our flesh, our old self, we have difficulty in saying no to it. So in verses 1 through 11, he's going, we have difficulty through saying no to our flesh. In 12 through 25, he moves into the suffering that these Christ followers are experiencing within their own lives. And the reason they're having this suffering is because they are following after Jesus. Then he moves into verse 26 and 30, where he talks about where they are so down and confused about what they should be doing that they don't know what to do. They're kind of lost in all of the things they're dealing with. So while you have these troubling situations that Paul is presenting, going, this is what you're walking through, he then gives these incredible assurances alongside of them. So in verses 1 through 11, when they talk about this, I can't say no to my old fleshly ways, the ways I used to be. I can't say no to those anymore. Paul reminds them in verses 1 through 11 that the old self is dead with Christ and the Spirit has power over the flesh. He reminds them, you are indwelled with the Spirit of God. You can say no to the old fleshly ways because of the Spirit that is dwelling within you. Then he moves in that portion where they talk about the suffering that they're experiencing because they're following after Jesus. He reminds them in 12 through 25 that there is going to be a day in which God renews all things into perfection. And he goes, this is just a little time that you're walking through this. There is going to be a day in which he restores all things to perfection. Then 26 through 30, when they're talking about, I don't know what to do. I'm going through the difficulties of life. I don't know where to turn. He reminds them, when you don't have the words to speak, the Spirit is speaking on your behalf to the Father. So you have these major hurdles that they're going, I don't know what to do in these situations. And Paul is coming in and going, don't forget the one that is indwelling you, the Spirit of God that is within you. So these assurances that he gives to these Roman believers at this time is this wake up to reality. He's grabbing their shoulders, he's shaking them awake, and he's going, don't forget what you have learned. It's the same reality that we started with from N.T. Wright that says, I am loved, therefore I am. This is what he's trying to get them to understand. So what Paul does at the closing of chapter 8 is he's driving home this truth that you are loved by God. And he's going to do this in this locker room speech, if you will, through asking these questions. So look in 31, the second half of that verse, into 32. Paul says, if God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? Now notice that Paul here has an indirect acknowledgement that there are moments that we feel like God is not for us. This is why he asked the question in verse 31, if God is for us, who can be against us? You don't ask that question unless you have moments in your life that you feel like God is not for you. Why else would you be asking that question? So he's acknowledging this. And it's this thought that many of us had in our lives when we follow after Jesus, where if we're honest, we've never really said those out loud, but in the depths of our souls, we're going, are you for me or are you against me? Because it feels like in this moment that you are against me. And Paul goes, no. Never forget that God is for you. And then the response that we have or the other believers have is, well, Paul, it sure doesn't feel like he is. That's really great for you to say, but it doesn't feel like God is for me right now. And Paul goes, no, stop for a moment. Stop from all of the thoughts and anxieties that you have in this moment, and just stop for a second and realize that God is so for you that he sent his son to die on your behalf. You don't make this move as God unless you are committed to the people that you are sending your son to die on behalf of. He goes, he is for you, no matter the circumstances that you are going through. So don't allow the circumstances that you're navigating to let you think differently. God is not against you, but he is for you. This is why Jesus came. This is why Christ came to this earth, is because he is for you. So you, Christ follower in this room, Paul is talking to the Roman believers, but he's talking to the believers in Hernando. And he goes, you are deeply loved by God. You are deeply loved by God. Paul continues to get them to reflect on this in verses 33 through 34. He says, who shall bring any charge against God's elect? Is it God who it is God who justifies? Who is to condemn? Christ Jesus is the one who died. More than that, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed is interceding for us. So I want you for a moment to think about a courtroom. Paul has this courtroom language that he uses here. Paul says, who's going to accuse or condemn God's children? The one that has the right to accuse them of wrongdoing has proclaimed them to be justified. This is the biblical language to mean be set right. So he goes, the one that has the ability to accuse them of wrongdoing says, you've been set right in my eyes. Not only that, the one who is the judge of the world, who is Jesus Christ, looks at them and says, I am interceding on their behalf. So the judge of the world looks at God's children and he says, I bring no charge against them. The one who has the ability to accuse, the one who has the ability to condemn, looks at them and says, I have no charge to bring against them. Not only that, Jesus, being 100% God and 100% human, has the ability to empathetically see into our lives and talk with the Father about it. This is where we see it lifted up the second time in the book of in the chapter 8 of Romans, where he says he's interceding on our behalf. Christ empathetically sees into our lives and has the ability to communicate to the Father about what we are walking through. But he not only has the ability, he has the want to. This is something that he wants to do on our behalf. Why? Because he is for you. He is for you. So once again, Paul is driving home this truth. You are deeply loved by God. Do not forget this, that you are deeply loved by God. But see, but Paul's been around church folk enough to know that twice isn't good enough, and that he is human enough to know that twice isn't good enough. And so he's going, well, okay, I know there's going to be people in the room going like, yeah, Paul, but you don't know my life. And so Paul goes in again in 35 through 37. And this is what he says. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? As it is written, for your sake we are being killed all day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. So clearly the people in Rome are going through a difficult time. You don't say, are you identifying with these words, unless there's a way that they're identifying with these words. And so he looks and he says, I know that you're going through difficult times, hard times. You've experienced persecution. You're going through famine. You're going without basic needs. There are threats of death upon you. And so they're going, how? Okay, Paul, if you acknowledge these things, then how in the world are you saying that God is for us? Once again, reiterating this assumption that they have, God doesn't love me. How else would you explain all of these things that I'm experiencing in this life? And Paul's response to them is, God has not abandoned you in the midst of life. God has not abandoned you in the midst of the difficulties of life. And he does this through pulling in a quote from Psalm 44. If we were to go to Psalm 44 this morning and read Psalm 44, it is a gut-wrenching psalm. The writer of Psalm 44 is not holding back his thoughts here. He's going through a horrible time. The statement of, for your sake, we are being killed all day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. Sheep have no defenses, right? There's nothing they can do to prevent themselves from being slaughtered. So the experience of the writer in Psalm 44 is going, this seems like a very hopeless situation. And so Paul pulls this in and goes, look, it is not a new thing for the people of God to go through difficulties in this life that makes them question where God is in the midst of it. This isn't new. In fact, these are some of the same words that can be used to describe the life of Jesus as well. The words that we see here, these are things that Jesus himself experienced as he was walking through life. And these things that if Jesus experienced them, it means that God did not abandon Jesus while he was going through that. If Jesus experienced this, mean that he did not stop loving his son when he was walking through persecution or distress or any of these things. He goes, his love did not stop for him in that moment. It's not going to stop for you either. So the hope that Paul is pointing out here is that if we are experiencing the same difficulties as Jesus, then we will also experience the same victory that Jesus is living. He goes, if you find yourself in this category of going through these difficult times, you're in great company. Because the experiences that Christ experienced, you also have the ability to experience the victory that Christ is living at this very moment. He does this by using this word, we are more than conquerors. If you really wanted to translate it to be high language, you're super conquerors. This is what he's trying to drive home here. You are more than conquerors, that all of the things that he lifts up here, they're going to be conquered. That peace is going to overcome distress. That celebration is going to shout down persecution. That fullness is going to overcome famine. That wholeness is going to conquer lack, danger, and death. That all of these distresses that he's lifting up here will be conquered by Christ when Christ returns and finalizes his victory over dark things. He goes, Christ has not left you. God's love has not left you in the midst of this. He is there with you in the midst of it, just like he always has been for his people, just like he always was for his son as he was walking through these difficult times. And it leads him to these words in verses 38 through 39. He says, for I am sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. Paul said, there is nothing. There is no thing that can separate you from the love of God. There may be things that try to muddy the waters, but it's not going to be able to separate you. Absolutely nothing that you are walking through means that God has abandoned you or left you on your own devices. No, he is there with you in the midst of it. Nothing shall separate us from the love of God. Listen to how Eugene Peterson summarized this verse. He said, I'm absolutely convinced that nothing living or dead, angelic or demonic, today or tomorrow, high or low, thinkable or unthinkable, absolutely nothing can get between us and God's love because of the way that Jesus, our master, has embraced us. I love that phrase, the way Jesus has embraced us. Because we all know what it feels like to be embraced. We all know what a hug means in the moment of difficulty of our lives. Doesn't matter if someone meets you in a moment of grief, in a moment of difficulty, and they have the best explanation as to why you're going through it. That doesn't mean nearly as much as if somebody comes up, says no words, and hugs you. What does God do in the midst of our difficulty? Paul says nothing's going to separate you because you've been embraced by the love of Christ. God's love, believer, is the foundation for our life. We have to remember this because life wants to tell us that we are not loved by God, but there is nothing in this world that shakes that foundation that we are loved by God. That is the foundation on which we stand. So that means everything we do is off of the basis of the love of God. Just go with me here. The love of God is the trampoline of our lives. Now, that is never going to be in any theological statement or book that you ever read. But that is where my brain is this morning. Is that if that is the love of God, everything I do springs off of that love of God. Everything I do, everything I say, the foundation on which I stand is the love of God. That means everything I think about towards others or I think about myself is informed by God's love. Let me say that again. What you think about yourself is informed by the love that God has for you. What you think about your neighbor or your enemy is informed by the love of God for you. It is based off of that. Everything you experience is from the foundation of God's love. Those things do not shake. The foundation of God's love for us does not shake because of the things that we experience in our lives. Everything that is done to you is manageable because you are on the foundation of God's love. So Paul's point is going, there is absolutely nothing that can separate you from this truth. You are loved, therefore you are. This is who you are because of the love of God. Now we know that the world that we live in around us is a dark place and that God has then given us gifts to use to take the love of God into the world around us. So when I think about this truth, it makes me think about the love of God being a reservoir. Again, you're not going to read this in any theological book, any way, shape, or form. This is from the Upora School of Hard Knocks. But you've got this reservoir, this deep reservoir of God's love. And the gifts that we've talked about, these spiritual gifts and these passions that he has given you, these are chutes, or again from Upora, ditches, that are extending from this reservoir that are flowing into the dark world around us. All of those things are allowing the love of God to overflow into our lives through the gifts that he has given us into the dark world around us. Now, if Christ followers then are to take the love of God into a world of darkness, darkness is going to try to stop it. Says it here. It is going to try to stop it. There just isn't anything that can stop it. So we will experience scary moments. We're going to experience horrendous slander and unjust misunderstanding. And those things will lead us to a place, as Psalm 44:24 says, why do you hide your face from us? Why are you forgetting our affliction and our oppression? Yet the difficulty of our experience does not mean that God's love does not exist and is overflowing into our lives. Those are things that are trying to cause us to forget the depth of God's love. What we cannot do in moments of difficulty is forget who we are, that we are deeply loved by God. That is the foundation on which we will always stand. So our spiritual gifts become the avenues, the chutes, if you will, through which we share the love of God with the world around us. So as these are going into the world, each spiritual gift that you have, it is allowing the world to experience the love of God through those spiritual gifts. So if the Lord has gifted you with the gift of giving, for example, and the world says you don't need to stop every single day and give that same person at 240 and get, money or food or clothing or anything every single day. That's a waste of your time. That's a waste of your money. You don't know why they're there or what they're doing with it. And so the world is saying like that is a ridiculous use of your gift. But yet in that moment, what you are doing is you're allowing that person to experience the love of God, and you're allowing the world around it to go, how is it that you continue to pour out your love on this person that you have no idea what they're doing with it? And he goes, because I'm drawing from a reservoir that's way deeper than what we could possibly dream, think, or imagine. So while I don't know what he's doing with it or what she's doing with it, I'm going to continue to do, because this is the gift that the Lord has given me to share his love throughout the world. But that also means that all of these gifts that we have, they come from the reservoir of God's love. They flow out of his love. So that means Paul lifts this up directly in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 through 13 when he talks about this. That means if you are teaching, but are not teaching so lovingly, then it is not of God. If you are leading, but you are not leading like Christ, it is not of Christ. If you are speaking into current issues, but it is not loving, it is not of God. That everything we do is flowing out of the love of God. This is the foundation on which we stand. This is the foundation on which we live. This is the foundation on which we speak, the foundation on which we walk, the foundation on which we move. We exist and we are in being because of God's love. And darkness is going to try to keep God's love from flowing into the world, but it can't do it. The reservoir of his love is too deep. It's going to continue to flow into this world, and you are the chosen vessel through which he is going to do it. You are the chosen vessel because you are deeply loved. And he goes, now that you know that you are deeply loved, it is time for others to know that they are deeply loved. And you are going to be the ones through which I do this. So the question before us that really this whole series has led to is, how are you going to use the gifts that God has given you to expand his kingdom in this world? Oh, church, we could act like this is every other Sunday sermon. It's easy. There's lunch after this, or brunch for you early risers. There's brunch after this. There is football games and naps and activities to be had this afternoon. There are so many things on our plate. You just want to walk out these doors, but yet the Lord is asking you, what gifts have I given you that I've shown to you? And how are you going to use that to fight back the kingdom of darkness within the world around us? So we talk about it all the time. We say it nearly every single week. But this is our moment of response to what the Lord has put before us. So the team's going to come and they're going to lead us in a response song. The response of the church is not always, let me stand and sing. Many times the response of the church needs to be, let me sit and be. Let me listen. Let me hear what he is saying to you. So in your seats, you have a handout that's all about where your next step is going to be. It's a time of reflection on the back of that. I intentionally put pens in your seats for you to have this moment to be able to write this down and take it with you. Because when the busyness of life is, you'll forget it. So use this next time of response to fill in those things if you feel like you can answer them. If not, spend time in prayer over them. I promise you one thing, there's no one on the stage who's going to be offended that you didn't stand and sing with them. Use this time as you need to use this time. So sit, spend time in that, answer, write it out. When you get finished with that, then stand, continue to sit, come to these altar rails and say, Lord, I'm giving this over to you. It's literally the time of the day in which we set aside and go like, hey, we're going to respond to what the Spirit's doing in our lives. So let's not waste it. Let's use it.